Welcome, hello and hi my creative friends. Today we're checking out one of the new wave of budget pencils. From a company that prides itself in making art supplies affordable to creators from every budget, with a range that spans drawing, painting and a whole lot of crafting, comes a pencil that styles itself as Expert. Today I give to you the Arteza Expert coloured pencils. I'm always very wary about any company that plasters expert or professional or world's best, just ask my mum, across the packaging. Experience tells me that those sorts of products are often, shall we say, not the highest quality. But that may not always be true, as I've been told many good things about Arteza and been asked again and again to check out these pencils. So perhaps the Arteza Expert pencils are the exception. Arteza is a company that was founded in 2015 in Florida, America. It's one of those little companies that started with one product they did really very well. They then took that product, which was actually gel pens, and basically exploded to make pretty much everything else you'd ever want to see in the art world. But does making everything mean it's all amazing? The Expert pencils, or Pro, as it looks like they are now being rebranded, are their most popular pencils, and I'm assuming Arteza's professional lineup. So I'm very excited and very curious to see exactly what they mean by expert. Today we're doing what we always do and throwing a series of tests at these pencils to answer that burning question, are they any good? Are they expert? First up, let's check out the design of the Arteza Expert pencils. This is the Arteza 48 tin of the Expert range of coloured pencils. If we jump over to the Arteza site, they have a few sets of pencils available, including metallic, triangular, pastel, bright, and the ones we're looking at, Expert. 48 is the smallest lot they offer in this range, with larger tins of 72 and the biggest set of 120 pencil kit. They also have a brand new second 48 tin set called the World Expert Kit. Strangely, if I look at the colour swatches with the new set and what I have here, they look exactly the same, so I'm not sure what's going on, but everyone loves new stuff. I'm also noticing some of these tins are now branded Pro. Looks like Arteza is rebranding. Back to our 48 tin here. Branding wise, the front is fairly plain. We have the Arteza logo, how many pencils we have, the range being Expert, and a turtle. Everyone loves a turtle. I think this may be an older design, as I've seen other animals on other Arteza tins recently, but the pencils are still the same. It also mentions the core size of 4mm and that they are artist quality. I guess we'll see. If we flip the tin over, we have quite a bit more information, including a decent, if digital, swatch and a couple of QR codes that take us to a resource page and an application to join the Arteza Club. Importantly, there's also a guarantee on the back that if this product doesn't perform properly, they will replace it. That's a really great sign a company has trust in their product, so a big positive for Arteza. If we flip it and open up our tin, here's some foam. In our tin lid, we also have another colour swatch, which is a nice touch. This one also has light fast ratings, which is great to see. If we remove this foam, here are our pencils. Wow, they are very vibrant and all look super glossy. They do look very well put together. This 48 kit has the removable trays to get to the layer underneath. The trays seem very deep and quite strong, although the bits to grab are quite small. I think if you had larger hands, this may be tough to do. I'd say you could easily store your pencils in this tin, as it's quite well thought out. Let's go take a close-up look at the pencils. This is the Arteza Expert pencil. It's sleek, elegant, and actually quite pretty. Feels very nice in my hand and sort of just gives a sense of being really well put together. It's very much a slinky, sleek looking pencil. The wax-based core is 4mm and quite vibrant and contained in what Arteza describes as soft wood. Not sure what that is, but looking at it, it has a nice tight grain. The pencil's length is a fairly common length of 175mm or 6.9 inches, and the overall diameter of the pencil comes in at a comfortable 7.6mm. If we look along the Arteza, we have a pre-sharpened tip and a barrel that's gloss, but not super gloss. We have the Arteza logo in an overly large font and a silver shield with the word Expert in it, followed by 2 silver rings. If we flip it, we have the colour name, the colour code, and the light fast rating in stars. The Arteza is capped by a rounded paint dipped end, which as always, I'm a fan of. Design-wise, there's nothing really special about the tin these pencils come in. It just doesn't really scream professional or quality. The graphics are so-so, the swatch is digital, and to be fair, I was serious about the word expert on these. Experience tells me that anything that plasters expert or professional across the front of a product is usually a marketing term made by people trying to sell lower end stuff to unsuspecting buyers. But the pencils themselves, they're actually pretty sexy. I'm not sold on the font choices here. To me, it feels a little large, and so much bold block lettering also tends to be something found on cheap student pencils. But the barrel and the feel and the vibrancy of these cores make these smooth, sleek, and really attractive once you get past the rest of it. Overall, it's a really strange combination of budget and what I'd call real premium feel. I'm honestly not sure what I should be feeling here other than I sort of quite like them. And I really can't wait to see what they can do. So with that in mind, let's test these pencils. Our first test today is the saturation and vibrancy test. In this test, we look at how bright and how saturated we can make these pencils and how consistent they are across various weights. We usually do this on a scale because that tells us about the consistency and the characteristics of a pencil brand. And we are going to do that, but today I'm also going to do it a little bit differently. And by that, I mean I'm also going to swatch these pencils first. I've been a bit hesitant swatching pencils if I don't have the entire complete color range to look at in one go. But I think with the Arteza, I just really like to see how these 48 pencils here look and feel on paper altogether. If you like the idea of swatching our pencil kits, let me know and I'll keep going with it for our future pencils. I'm swatching these by the order and numbers Arteza used for their swatch on the rear of the tin. It's white, what looks like black. The numbers don't really seem to have an order to them, which would be annoying without this tin, but that seems to be the way with companies which don't really plan their numbering system. I have to say, initially these pencils are very pleasant to use and are surprisingly creamy. The colors are vivid and saturated, and it's very easy to get a really thick, opaque layer of color over the swatch. And they seem really easy to control as I go through. For a 48 pencil kit, Arteza has a really nice, really broad spectrum of color. I am noticing a few blocks of color very similar to each other. Those three dark blues are pretty much the same, and as I'm going along, I'm noticing we're missing a lot of skin tones and browns. But for Arteza's smallest kit, it's pretty well thought out overall. Well, that was fun. The 48 kit is full of really vibrant, really poppy colors, which is a very decent color range for their smallest kit. Standouts for me, I think, are that I particularly like the turquoise color, A604, and the peony pink, A401. Both of them are just very pretty colors. When you're using these pencils, they are very comfortable, and you can really feel the wax when you're layering these down. They sort of feel a little bit like Prismacolors. Like a lot of budget pencils, they came arranged in a bit of an order in the tin, but not enough that I didn't have to hunt a bit for some of the pencils. But it's only 48 pencils, and the swatch on the back made things fairly easy. So this didn't take anywhere near as long as our last test swatch with the 216 Ohuhu markers. Let's break out our scale and check out the second part of our saturation and vibrancy test. What I'm doing here is what we normally do and picking 4 colors from this kit plus our dominant black and white. And what we're going to do is measure these across various weights. The way we're going to be doing this is by putting down pigment from the pencils at 5 different pressures: 25 grams, 50 grams, 100 grams, 200 grams, and 400 grams. So light to heavy. As the pressure builds up, hopefully the pencil should become more and more saturated, which will show us just how consistent and predictable this saturation is. For any paper people out there, I'm just using basic 120 GSM white multimedia paper for these tests. Let's go get started. The pencils I'm using today for our Arteza tests are Crimson Red A207, Spring Green A601, Peacock Blue A501, Lemon Yellow A104, our Black Noir A017, and our White Quartz A001. Let's start with our red, as we always do, at our 25 grams. For 25 grams, that red is very saturated. The green going down is quite light, but what we'd expect at 25 grams. The blue is very similar to the red, and the yellow for a 25 gram yellow is very strong. The black is pretty much on parity to the rest. Our 50 grams is next. The red is a doubling from the 25 grams, but that green is still very light. The blue is an improvement, but not as good as the red, and that yellow, like the green, is stronger, but not a doubling. That black has definitely doubled. The 100 gram red has had an immediate doubling, but as the weight goes up, these pencils get a little scratchier and start feeling a little more difficult to keep a consistent weight. The green is a nice doubling, as is that blue finally. The yellow has had a massive jump in vibrancy here, as has that black, which, if I didn't mention it before, is a very black. 200 grams. Again, that red is very impressive. I think it's almost at its most saturated here. The green is much nicer and closer to what we saw on the swatch. The blue is really nice, but like the red, feeling like it's getting closer to its densest color. The yellow is popping at 200 grams, and that black is getting very black. Onto our 400 grams. Between the 200 grams and the 400 grams, I'm starting to get a lot of leads breaking. Not a huge problem at the moment, but it's worth mentioning. The red, green, blue, yellow, and black are very saturated at the 400 gram mark. Not a doubling from the 200 grams, but they are burnishing the paper texture really nicely with this extra weight. Let's look at our white. 25 grams is going down very well. The 50 grams is a doubling from the 25 grams. I feel the 100 grams isn't a full doubling from the 50. Like our colors, the 200 grams is probably the point this white starts shining, and our 400 grams, it's just denser and burnishing the black paper nicely at this weight. So that's our saturation and vibrancy test. Overall, it's been pretty comfy using these pencils all the way through this. The colors really are starting to pop around that 200 gram mark. The swatches reveal that there are several beautiful colors Arteza has, but all of them overall are very vibrant and very poppy, with not much of what I'd call subtle tones. That can be kit specific though, but it's worth mentioning. On the scale, our light end is very saturated, which can be an issue when trying to do more subtle work. When we get into the heavier weights with these pencils, I did find it much harder to keep a consistent weight, and I found them jumping around a bit. I was also starting to find that the pencils seem to struggle a bit with the breakages over 100 grams, which may be a quality issue, or it may mean that they're very soft pencils. Time to give our Artezas a score here. To do that, we're using our scale of A to F, with S sitting above it all being superb. Today for the Artezas, I'm going to give them a B for the saturation and vibrancy test. I'm really enjoying them, but they are sort of feeling a bit like good colouring pencils. Our next test is the single pencil gradient test. This is a pretty stock standard test for any pencil, and that's because it tells us a lot about the characteristics of that pencil, and importantly, how much control we have over it. What we're going to do is take our 6 test pencils and make a nice seamless gradient while taking into account how easy it is to go from a very heavy pressure to a very light pressure and how the pencil feels while doing so. Let's go check it out. As we start with our red, I have to talk about what really is my first major problem with these pencils. As I'm sharpening them, the red just keeps breaking again and again as I put pressure onto the paper. It's super frustrating. Finally, I think we're off with our red gradient, but no, it's just snapped again. Let's start this test again. And again, my pencil is getting extremely short here from all this sharpening. I think I'm gonna have to try and continue from this point. Like our saturation test, the red is very similar. It's quite consistent, drop down from our heavyweight into the lighter end, but I do struggle to get a super light end here. Our green is much better than that red. The color is going down very nicely, but there is a large drop in color from the 200 gram to the 100 gram mark. Our blue is a bit more consistent than the green, but not quite as good as the red. It's still pretty heavy on that light end. Our yellow immediately snaps again. Sharpen, sharpen, and snap again. Okay, sharpen again, sharpen again. Finally, it's off. To be fair, it's a very nice gradient down. Much like the red, it's pretty consistent. Onto our black, it hasn't snapped, but I'm so worried it will now that I've done a terrible gradient. I am noticing how it's got a little scratchy and not really super light on that light end. Let's check out that white. We're starting off very dense with the really good white, but there is obviously a lot of white crumbs coming off this pencil. As we go down, the gradient is pretty good, and I'm finding I'm moving through most of our weights really easily. Well, that was our gradient test, and it took a lot more effort than I thought it was going to. I've basically chewed through that entire red pencil with sharpening. So much so that I'm not super sure how we're going to do the rest of the tests. So gradient-wise, the red and yellow were great. Funnily, that both of them were the most problematic. The blue, green, and black were also decent, but that white was excellent. These pencils really struggle a bit with the lighter end of the weight spectrum, and that's pretty much the same across every pencil here. That's usually a sign they're a softer pigment, but for the heavy and mid-weights, they have done very well overall. Comfort-wise, they're really comfortable pencils, but quality control? Yeah, those breaks mean they aren't great there. Anyway, ignoring the breaks and only looking at our gradients, I'm going to give the Arteza a really solid B for the gradient test. Breakage aside, the lack of a low end is where these pencils struggle. It's that time again for perhaps our most important test, the blending test. Blending is one of those things that often ends with surprising results. A good pencil should blend well, if not excellently, and so far I've been much more impressed than I thought I was going to by how well these pencils have performed. But can they actually blend? For this test, I'm taking our 4 primary colors, a red to green and blue to yellow, and I'm going to, you guessed it, blend them. We're going to be paying special attention to what happens with the points of those gradients where the colors meet. What I'm looking for is a seamless uniting of the 2 colors and how they mix together. Let's have a look, shall we? Look, let's be perfectly honest, this tiny red here, our crimson red A207, has been breaking too much. I'm not going to have enough pencil left to finish the tests. I think the core must be shattered inside it for it to be so bad. So I'm going to do something a little unusual and swap it out with another red, rose red A205. If we start in with our rose red, damn. Okay, that's not a good start. Let's hope it's a one-off and sharpen it up again. So far, so good. As I'm laying down our red here, it's still a pretty good gradient with this red, as it was with our last red, but I am being as gentle as possible with it. Let's go up with our green. I'm trying to be super careful with these leads, and in doing so, I think I may have been a little bit too gentle where we're crossing over, as I'm not letting it mix as well as I normally would. There is a fairly decent blend appearing though in the middle, where we're getting a nice brownie tone to our blend. Onto our blue and snap. Sigh. After a quick sharpen, the blue is going down very similar to the gradient test. We drop through that mid-range quickly into the lighter end. Up with our yellow. This yellow has been super dense, so hopefully it's going to be a nice blend. It's actually pretty good. I'm struggling a bit here as the pencil isn't really burnishing into the paper texture because I'm too afraid to put big pressure on it. So there's a lot of white left behind, but where it is mixing, it's a really nice green coming through. And that was the blending test. Overall, not great. The colors are blended, but not what I'd consider enough for a pencil this vibrant. Here's the thing, I actually have this sneaking suspicion these pencils would be amazing at blending if they didn't keep breaking. They feel creamy and really nice when they're actually blending and really feel like they should actually be amazing at it. We just can't do it because the core just breaks. Realistically, I think I've been too scared to put as much pressure as I normally would or make our blends as dense as I normally would because they just won't survive if I do. And before you say it's pencil specific, it's a completely new, completely different red we're using and it's still doing it. If Arteza could solve this, well anyway, for a confusing and a bit disappointing blending test, I'm going to give them, you guessed it, a solid B-. I would love to try blending these if they would just stop breaking. For the white factor test, we're going to use those blending tests we prepared earlier and bring our white pencil in and lay it over the top of the primary colors. We really want to see here what effect, if any, the white has when blending with the other colors. How the white pencil changes and lightens the already drawn colors. Will it burnish? Will it blend? Will it do anything at all? Let's give it a go and see what happens. I didn't really have any problems with this white in the gradients or the saturation tests, so I'm very much hoping it can hold up for this test. As I start layering it down, it's doing well. Well, it hasn't broken yet anyway. On the red and green, the white really helped both lighten and burnish these pencils. I think because this white seems like it's a really strong white, I'm able to smoosh all that pigment together and it's doing a really good job. We've also come up with a slightly more pastel color, particularly in the red, meaning that white's a really strong white. It's similar for the blue and yellow here. We've had a lot of lightening, particularly on the blue, which feels like what I'd hope these pencils could do if they didn't keep breaking. It has really helped push these colors together and into that paper. This is a great white. It feels very much what a Prismacolor white feels like, vibrant and really strong. I actually think this white test has redeemed our pencils ever so slightly in the blending test, as we can see a bit of what the potential of these pencils would have been if they were a bit more consistent in their manufacturing. For a redeeming white pencil, I'm giving the Arteza a really solid A- in their white factor. Slotting in here, really one of the better whites we've had. This is a simple test. We're going to compare the color this pencil puts down to the color displayed on the barrel swatch. This test is really simple, but as always, really important, as really the only way to know what color a pencil puts down is what we see on the barrel. For this test, I'm bringing in the pencil barrel and I'm putting it next to the gradient we created earlier. I'm going to use our tiny original red, as that was what we did the gradient test on. We are then just going to compare them by eye to see how accurate the colors are. Okay, our tiny red is in and the red is close. I think right at the densest weight, we're close. There does seem to be a bit more violet in the pigment than the barrel though. The green, which looks like a giant in comparison to that red, is much darker than the pigment put down. The blue is very similar to the green, and to be fair, is much more pastel than the pencil barrel. The yellow, which I have to say is my favorite in these comparison tests, is very close. I'd say it's the best. Our black, that's a good black, but the pigment has a bit more gray in it than the barrel. Well, there we go. A very simple test, but always interesting to see. The green and the blue are really very different, and while the red and the black are closer, they're still different enough to be a problem when you're using them. The yellow is great, and it's such a poppy yellow, which is always good to see. Color accuracy is really easy to do with pencils, but it just isn't here. For that, and only because the yellow is so good, I'm giving the Artezas a C in color accuracy. And that slots the Arteza in here. Alrighty folks, it's time for my favorite test, the break factor. How much pressure do we need to put on these pencils before they break? If you immediately answered not much, then shh. As always, we may be in for a surprise. To me, when you look at a break point in a pencil, it's all about consistency. Does the brand have a consistent mix in their core to get a similar snapping point every single time? A pencil can be hard and a pencil can be soft, but if all the break points are similar, then that's intentional. If not, it's just bad manufacturing. Let's check it out. To make this test as consistent as possible across all the pencils we're going to review, I've set up a couple of controls. I'm going to sharpen each pencil to a point. I'm then going to dull them slightly by drawing 3 lines at pressure. Basically, this will make sure we don't have a super fine point that will break immediately. I'm then going to be using a 45-degree square to get a consistent angle of pressure. Makes sense? Let's go break some leads. Just because we can, we're going to include both of our reds here to make it a bit more interesting. Let's start with our absurdly short original red pencil, our Crimson Red A207. Taking off that tip, 1, 2, 3, and setting up our angle. As our weight starts building, it's already much higher than I thought it would be, and snap! 1,119 grams. Surprisingly strong for a pencil that's been such a pain. Onto our replacement red, the Rose Red A205. Let's set this up. This red has been a bit more consistent than our original one, so I'm curious how it's going to go. The weight is on and the numbers are climbing. 200, 400, 5, 6, 7, and snap! 1,011 grams. Actually quite close to our first red. Onto our green. Taking off the tip and setting up our angle. The green has been a bit lighter than the other colors, so maybe it's a harder core. 500, 6, 7, 8, and snap! 932 grams, softer than our previous red. Now the blue. It's performed very similar to the red in our testing. Let's quickly set it up and start our weight. 200, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and snap! 1,146 grams. Not surprisingly, still consistent with our reds. On to our yellow. This yellow has been very pleasant throughout this testing today, so hopefully it continues to impress. The setup is done and the weight is on. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and snap! 992 grams. For a pencil with so many breaks, these weights are all surprisingly similar. Our black, which like the yellow has been pretty consistently a nice black throughout the testing. We've set it up and the weight is on. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, no! 1,183 grams. Very interesting. And finally, our white. This white has been very vibrant throughout the whole testing, so I have a suspicion it'll be soft, but let's see. The setup is done and the weight is on. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 983 grams. Well, there you go, not soft at all. Well, as always, this test was a real surprise for me. Because of all the leads I'd had breaking through this video, I'd assumed the results for this test would be all over the place. They did break, of course, but they had broken in such a way that we've had one of the most consistent results for any pencil. Our lowest break point was the green at 932 grams, and our highest was 1,183 for the black. While that's 150 grams difference, a majority of the other pencils were usually less than 100 grams different between each other, which is frankly quite amazing. Our average break point here was 1,052, which puts them here below the Faber-Castell Black Edition and above the Winsor & Newton Studio Edition, quite close to the top of our charts. A lot of this test is about consistency, and if we hadn't had so many breaks with our leads in the previous tests, I'd likely, based upon these results, be marking these fairly high. But due to all the problems we've had and taking into account how well they've done here, I'm going to mark the Arteza Expert pencils a B in the break factor. Consistent on the scale, but the real world breaks means a B is quite generous. It's time for our final test. Do these pencils spark joy or do they cause despair? This test is very much based on my personal opinion, which I've formed across all of these tests. Do the Arteza colored pencils spark joy? Let's do what we did last video and make some art while we chat about these pencils. I'm setting out to do something a little bit simple with these pencils, but something that'll end up fairly bright and poppy as that suits the kit that I have. So I've settled on my little dinosaur friends here. I think they're going to be a sweet little piece. Starting at the start with the pencil design. They are still confusing. I really like the design of them. They look sexy. That is until I catch sight of the chunky font. Then I'm a little bit like, no. They have a real feel of premium about them when you look at them, but you don't expect it when they arrive. Arteza should really drop the term expert and may actually have recently done that, as I've seen images with pro instead of expert. Either name though really does set up the expectation that they're going to be bad. They're really not. They're very comfortable to use, very creamy and very saturated. I found they move easily across the page and the shaft of the pencil has been a pleasure to handle for this entire test. I mean, it was obviously really tricky to hold onto that tiny red, but it was a comfortable tiny red. These pencils are, of course, what I call a budget pencil. The 48 kit I have here goes for about $57 Australian, which is $1.19 per pencil, with the 72 going for $101. That's pretty good value for money. They are very affordable, which I love. For the price, I gotta be honest, I was expecting them to do much worse, but they surprised me. Performance-wise, I wasn't expecting them to do as well as they have. They are poppy, saturated, gradiented well, and are blended decently. The white has been a major standout with them. It has to be one of the best I've used and easily on par with the Prismacolor, which is a weird thing. I researched the heck out of these pencils before I reviewed them, and quite a few reviews suggested they were wax-based pencils which felt like oil. They compared them to the Faber-Castell Polychromos, but I didn't find that at all. Quite often they felt almost, I'm saying almost here, as good as Prismacolors. I am finding a few interesting things as I'm creating our cute little artwork here. Firstly, obviously because of the brightness, I'm really pleased I chose very carefully the subject I was going to create with them, as it suits this super bright style. But I think they would struggle to create something more subtle. I'm also trying to use them a lot for blending here, and I've found they are quite limited on that side of things. Not bad, but just okay. Particularly when trying to blend different colors. Blending shades lighter or darker aren't so bad, but if you want to bring in a pink over, say, a green, it just ends up being fuzzy and muddy. Now the negatives. I think these must be the worst pencil I've ever used for breakages. Even our hard brittle pencils like the Tombos don't struggle like these. Multiple times they've broken in these tests, but even while I've been drawing here, the leads are falling out and I'm experiencing breakages. It is often at the harder weights above 200 grams, but that's not very hard at all. I'm really suspecting the bonding between the leads and the barrel isn't great. This may be a problem with the design or simply how they're made. One of the issues that smaller companies like Arteza face is they often struggle with manufacturer quality control. I think realistically, if this breaking problem wasn't there, I'd actually say that these are the best budget pencils I've ever seen. But it is, unfortunately, and for me, that's a bit of a deal breaker because if I can't rely upon a pencil, I can't use it in my work. Our little guys here are done and they are very cute and very vibrant, but it took a lot of work. So for me, for my joy factor, I'm going to say no, the Artezas do not spark joy. I'm very keen to try out the rest of the offerings that Arteza has available, and I think if they ever did update their manufacturing process to solve this constant breaking, the Arteza Experts would actually become one of my favorite pencils. But for today, for the joy factor, I'm going to give them a C. And that puts them right here. Okay, so we're almost done here, and what I'm going to do now is take all of our scores and average them across all our tests to come up with the final big score. So for today, the Arteza Expert pencils receive a B-. Well done, Arteza. And they slot right in here. I've been in many minds today what to class our Arteza as, student, hobbyist, or professional, as I've been working through with them today. The quality of them really does drop them from a professional range as much as I'd like to put them there, and while they are very basic in some senses, they are much better than a student pencil. So that only leaves hobbyist. If you can deal with the issues, the price point makes them a very tempting hobbyist pencil. And that's it. Thank you very much for sticking with me on this up and down journey today to look at the Arteza Expert range of pencils. What do you think? Do you use them? Do you like them? Do you plan to check them out? Let me know in the comments below. We are back to Derwent next episode with the Pro Color. Apparently a pencil that combines the best of the artists and the Coloursoft ranges. Most excellent. But until then, if you want more stuff, have a little look at the links below. We have a very active Discord that you can sign up for. And if you want to come chat and hang out with us on Twitch, I'm there most days. That's it for now, everyone. Have a brilliant day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.